Thank you. All right, good morning. Good morning. I can't see everybody.
We've got clickers.
Oh, we got clickers.
What should we do with this?
So Chris and I are super well prepared. And let's start. Do we have slides? Or? Okay.
The clicker works.
Okay, speaker notes are...
I need someone from IT to help me out here.
Yeah, wow. Well, there we go. All right, so I run IT at Red Hat. I've been there almost 20 years, and...
I'm CTO for Red Hat. I've been at Red Hat for 20 years, so I'm telling Marco how it works. Yeah.
So I'm the guy that's supposed to use the stuff he builds. Why would I do that, right? It's insane, right? So that's where our little friction is, right? I could use just like a different company, we would be all happy and it would work perfectly. But no, we're actually using Red Hat stuff. But so that's the little friction that we have. Obviously, we know each other a little bit. And once in a while, I need a day with Chris to tell him how awful his products are. That's usually what we do. So, all joking. So Chris and I go back 20 years. We've been at Red Hat or at least in me, for different roles. I think Chris as well, right? And let's talk a little bit about what we do at Red Hat from an IT perspective, right? And if you go, here's my clicker. If you see what we do, right, you think it's like, who is Red Hat, right? Is their IT even big, right? And you can see we do have on-prem. And there is good reasons that Chris can probably also talk about. We do have on-prem data centers, right? We still in 10 data centers. We actually reduce quite a bit. But we actually also moving to new data centers for, again, reasons Chris can elaborate. Bare metal, you see 10,000 bare metal systems. Every time I see these numbers, it's like, we got to drive those down. 12,000 VMs, you can't believe that. 20,000 containers. It's insanity. But this is a company that we run, right? The same on public cloud, right? We use every different cloud. And we literally use them. So we are not a on-prem shop, and we have a little bit on the cloud. Most of IT, you'll see later, is running in the cloud, and especially some of the critical pieces. Global deployment, you can read it yourselves across regions. So Red Hat operates in X countries. And in each country, right, think about, yes, there is data centers, we run our ERP system, we run our Salesforce, etc. But then every office has like video conferencing, laptops, etc., etc. So think about that as Red Hat IT. Most of you, I see a lot of Red Hatters here, but if you are in a company, that's what IT does, right? It's not just basically applications, right? The scale, you see it, more than 20,000 global associates. And developers, it's definitely a number bigger than 6,000 developers. Chris, you want to add something on the...
Yeah, so actually, as an engineering organization, for many years, we had the wisdom to be our own shadow IT. And so we ran all of our own infrastructure for our build systems, for developer tooling, because these guys, I mean, they can't really run a system unless it's just something simple like a database maybe. But eventually,
even there we struggle.
Eventually, we realized that we had more important things to do. So we gave this wonderful gift to the IT team, which was to support all of the engineering infrastructure as well as the rest that he described. So those thousands of developers, each of whom are quick to be grumpy if something doesn't work, we're Marco's customers.
So maybe also a funny anecdote, I used to be also in the product groups, and I used to run that shadow IT organization that was building basically everything, the build systems, GUI systems. I did a few turns in Red Hat in different roles, end up in IT, and I get that beautiful gift.
Get that gift right back.
Yeah. So let's talk about the infrastructure we had a few years, because I think the lesson that I want you to take away is we get to AI, but one of the lessons we've done, and maybe we've been lucky, a few years ago, we had the classic, you see it on the left side, we had stuff on Red Hat virtualization, great product. We had stuff on Red Hat OpenStack. And then we had on top, we had VMs, we had OpenShift, we had VMs. And then we also were in the clouds on the right side. You see that this was basically the infrastructure we had. Also from a data perspective, it was very distributed. We get to the data in a second. But this led to a very complex operation. So this is not just operating Chris's stuff. This is also operating our ERP system, our whatever HR system. This was all the environment we had. Super complex. There was no layer that you can say, hey, this is the simplicity in between. This is what we had. This was basically our big challenge, right? As an inconsistent developing experience, high platform team maintenance cost, complex, slow debugging. We had failures left and right. And I remember this was 22, just out of Corona, and you had like SSO errors every day you had, and then all his associates, his 10,000 people, would call us and saying, hey, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. And we had serious, basically it was just getting too complex. And we had to do, hey, we got to simplify that, right? So you see, we're using Red Hat products, right? So I was joking about using others. But even that was like just too complex layer.
One of the things that we had attempted leading up to this was building this sort of unified stack, so trying to move away from this complexity. In our view, from the engineering point of perspective, we thought, well, we'll build the perfect stack. We'll use it as sort of the first phase, almost like alpha and beta testing, as our infrastructure to support our platforms. Turns out that was a difficult journey between the two organizations, and over time, instead, we decided that we would do that sort of testing and validation in a more traditional CI/CD context, and really leverage the stable products that we deliver as part of the infrastructure that we then consume from the engineering point of view. So that complexity and the overall simplification, I think, was important for both of us. And honestly, you'll see throughout this conversation, Red Hat isn't special. We talk to customers all the time, and we see very similar challenges internally with all of our customer bases in different enterprise businesses. So.
Yeah, there was a lot of good ideas about, hey, use our own products very early, right? I mean, there was one environment we literally used, basically developers would do a push, and it was basically used the next day. It just got to a point, yes, this is dog fooding, at the same time highly disruptive if you have over 6,000 developers, right? And so that was basically for the whole company, let's get to a standardized setup. And to be honest, it's again, I look this back and saying this was a strike of luck to really go and really do this. And you see the architecture we have now. Literally, we are still, as you saw, data centers, we do that. Maybe you should afterwards say why we still do a lot of bare metal. But then also public cloud, heavily public cloud. The layer of Red Hat OpenShift is literally, this is the layer that kind of allows us to operate, to automate it, to actually build on top of this layer. And we still have virtual machines, but now with OpenShift virtualization, and you saw it earlier today, like Emirates, the bank, Emirates, they use it. We use it internally as well, as in literally drive down the complexity on that. So virtual machines, containers, we took a lot of old apps that we were running and put it in virtual machines, right? And think again, this is IT, so you have an application that does the badging for the doors. You get like a lot of weird stuff that you gotta bring into an environment. That was actually a Microsoft application. You gotta put that in a VM, you put it on this level, and you have a standardized platform, right? And so this is super cool that we have that. On top then, internal data and AI platform. Again, data, I feel like I could say, hey, this was a very strategic move 2 years ago. get rid of all the data platforms, build one data platform. I think it was pure luck that we decided on that. But 2 years, or maybe 2.5 years ago, we had a mess with data. We had a mess with data. It was not that our ERP data was wrong, but every person, it feels like every person, so if you're a Red Hat, don't get offended, every person took this data, and instead of building on top of the data, they would copy the data. And so, our financial data was copied 73 times. And on top of these 73 times, everybody did some analysis, some scientific, hey, this is the forecast, this is that, this is that. And guess what? There was no single source of truth. It was all a super mess. And 73 copies, you can guess, this was also to maintain these copies. And where did most of these copies end up? In spreadsheets. And people send spreadsheets around, a mess. And if you laugh, I'm convinced in your company that's the same thing going on, right? And so this is where we literally, in a very unlike Red Hat top-down approach, we're building we call it Dataverse. We build an environment that data is in there. We worked with the different users as in, hey, get rid of your data, you can use this, you build your data product in a very modern way. And we got down to one of the things we do every quarter, you got to close your books, basically, or kind of close the quarter. They used to be 7-8 days, and it was not accurate. And now we got it literally in minutes, and it's accurate to the cents, right? Because you know which deal closed, what did, etc. So stuff that really helps you operationally, but then kind of really getting the data in one thing. One note I want to just make is we have more dashboards. We use Tableau. We have more dashboards than employees in this company. Just as a kind of a note, right? And just a few months ago, I think October, we switched off, I think, 2,400 dashboards. We just removed them. We didn't do change management. We didn't tell anybody. How many people complained? I think there was one complaint, and then we explained, no, we switched it off. Okay, never used it anyway. So it was amazing, right? And I'm convinced in your companies, same thing going on. Now, why do I stress data so much and this infrastructure? Guess when AI comes, where do you want to have your data? In 73 spreadsheets or in one data verse? I think that's the thing you gotta really remember. As in, you wanna add something here?
You mentioned bare metal, so let's geek out for 1 minute. The value of running on bare metal, I think, comes in two different dimensions. One is more about capabilities. So running directly on bare metal means you have direct access to critical CPU capabilities, namely virtualization extensions. Without having direct access to bare metal, you do something called nested virtualization, which, while functional, incurs a very significant performance overhead. The other thing that's really interesting in this context, speaking of data, is you get direct access to accelerators. So now this common platform has capabilities to leverage hardware for traditional applications in VMs, of course, the container-based applications, and then this next-generation AI-enabled applications, which I think itself is really important. And then from, we're trying to be kind to Marco's team. From the kindness of our heart, we're trying to eliminate extra complexity and additional layers of virtualization platforms with additional container platforms and AI platforms on top. So, really is helpful. Now, when we talk about those AI conversations that we're having with customers, I did hear some chuckling. I would say the most common conversation I have starts with data. And everybody copies data and puts data in spreadsheets, which isn't necessarily the best starting point for building your efficient, effective AI journey. So,
that's a good point. I think let's shift to AI a little bit.
Speaking of AI.
Do what?
Speaking of AI.
Speaking of AI, thank you for the segue. Again, remember the architecture we have with OpenShift in the middle, right? That's where also we have a lot of control, being on the public cloud that we can do compute there, or being on the on-premise. Now, this is a diagram we try to use here, and like I said, consistency, automation, it all helps us in the previous slide that we showed. That's the blueprint on how we got there. Now, if you look at this from an enterprise, the vision that we have, there is like different layers. The foundational layers is what we talked about. You have data, you have knowledge, right? I talked about the 73 copies bringing data in. There's more data, right? Your PDF that describes your standard operating models. There is a lot of data that's not in the Dataverse yet, but it is data you need for AI. But that's the model, right? Be it, or the foundation, data, knowledge, the models, then the processes, and security. Don't forget about security, as in AI and security is awesome, but it can also be criminals use the same thing, right? So keep that in mind, right? But this is how we're looking at it. You have the foundation there that you do data and governance on that one that you know. The next layer is what we see is an associate, or and we call associates employees, AI empowerment. That's your Copilot, that's your Gemini, whatever you use. In my opinion, you gotta do that, right? And I think just over the last year, we enabled every Red Hatter to use a tooling like that. And you say amazing things, right? In some cases, you get worried if people start doing their whole development basically in one of these models, but it is fascinating, right? First week, people write better emails. Second week, they actually realize that's not actually the added value. The added value is to actually really use that that empowerment that you get from that layer. I think that's what we did. This is like maybe a little joke. In IT, when you roll out something new, you get 20, at least at Red Hat, you get 20,000 people telling you you're a moron and this is the wrong choice. Now, when we rolled this out, it was actually, people were happy. And I never get happy notes, not even from him, saying, hey, this was awesome. All of a sudden, this was like enabling that. This was basically that underlying level.
Yeah, so I want to just bring in an engineering perspective on this one. So first of all, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you the mistake that we made. So we started from an engineering point of view, actually from a company point of view, on an AI journey. A little bit after ChatGPT was launched into the world, and we all started to understand the value of generative AI. The first thing we did, we built a legal document that told our associates what you could and couldn't do with AI, and we scared the pants off of everybody. And as a result, people were afraid to use AI, and if they did, they wouldn't tell us about it. So we had a shadow AI problem. So part of this was taking the product work that we were doing, deploying it with Marco's team, and then bringing it back from an engineering point of view as a set of tools that we could use to learn and operate AI as part of our development practices. And as we made a mistake in the beginning, we rectified that. We produced a new kind of recommendation for associates that was much shorter. So instead of this much legal language, it was just don't do something stupid. And if you need to buy something, make sure you use the proper procurement process. And then we switched gears to how do we get associates engaged? How do we get our engineers engaged? And we started with, first and foremost, just education. So we did a bunch of outreach, we built some educational programs, and we started effectively training. We did that as just an opt-in. We recommended that you take this, but it wasn't required. Then we switched gears a little bit from learning to experimentation. And in the experimentation phase, we were a little more intentional. And we really asked our engineers to make intentional experiments. And that was the first phase. And then the next phase was those experiments could be anything. It could be build an itinerary for a vacation to go skiing with Marco. Or build something that helps you sort your email, or something that may not actually be useful in your daily workflow, but it gives you experience. Then we shifted to those experiments, connect them to work, and now we made it a little more intentional. We asked associates to do this, and we had managers directly connected to ensuring that was being done as part of really the development process. And I think the first mistake, important to recognize, and then that kind of phasing of learning, experimenting, and then taking that experimentation into your daily work was really important. And now we're in a new phase, which you'll see as we go through the rest of the stack, which is consolidating, let 1,000 flowers bloom, like we do in open source, and then find the most mature technical projects or the most mature AI approaches that can be leveraged across the business to build these higher level business transformations and insights that Marco will do.
Yeah, let me talk, I think we got to speed it up a little bit. The AI for business transformation, that's, again, below is associate engagement, right? Or engagement, empowerment, use AI, use it well. I think we succeeded there quite well. And then in the middle one is, how do you actually transform certain business processes with AI? And we've done a massive transformation of our sales tooling. And there as well, we introduced AI capabilities to help and to actually remove a few steps. This year, we'll add more capabilities that will help actually, in the end, our sales team. But these are business transformation. And some of them are using Red Hat technology. Some of them we used whatever is out there. For example, I'll give you a simple example. If you do expense controls or expense claims, this is not the area you want to reinvent the wheel. You use an application, they're out there, you do that. But in certain cases, I think on the sales side, we use that quite a bit. We have some use cases that we have built AI very well, like probably all of you, that have a pilot going on. We have a project going on now. We have 2 or 3 of those that really work well. One big and a few ones that are small but very powerful. They remove bottlenecks, they remove operational friction in there. That's what we do on that layer. Okay. Continue. Yeah. Let me just continue with the last layer, the AI insights. The insights, that's probably the more experimental one, but has a very powerful outcomes. Remember, we have Dataverse with all the transactional data, has a lot of data in there. We have documents that we collected that are basically our standard operating procedures. We have connections into like the staff roster, for example. And now the AI Insights is basically a tooling that was developed internally more as an experiment that you can basically go and ask, how many people are in Chris's org? Or how is the forecast for this quarter coming, right? And so that's the insights. And we've done we used to buy services from one of the big consulting companies. Hey, build me, we got this problem, we got a streamlined organization, we got to expand here. We're starting to use this instead of paying, if you're from one of the big consulting companies, this is something you got to pay attention. All of a sudden, we have a tooling that actually gives us that insight. And not yet a product that we sell, but this is an area, and there's companies do this, but this is an area that helps us for the whole corporation.
Yep. Keep moving.
Let's talk about the AI platform. Again, OpenShift is the foundation, no surprise. Ansible is literally the automation. We do everything is automated, highly automated. The environment runs very well. I actually, before Christmas, somebody asked me, hey, Marco, how do you monitor your environments? I was like, holy crap, I don't actually know. But I know it works so well, it never pops up. But we do have the regular dashboards. But it's a lot is helping with Ansible on that one. But again, here you see it, OpenShift Foundation, OpenShift AI, and then the internal data and the AI platform. And then you have, like we saw from Chris Morgan, basically how this is set up. Maybe you want to add more on this one?
We'd be remiss if we didn't mention automation. Certainly part of the pursuit of AI is to build efficiency for businesses, so that you can think of that as a form of automation. At the platform level, we make extensive use of Ansible as part of our automation tool. So we've reduced some of the complexity that Marco described earlier on this unified platform. We automate managing and provisioning, managing, lifecycle management of this platform with Ansible, and we have deep integration for secrets and secrets management with HashiCorp Vault, which I think you'll hear more about the Hashi in an upcoming session on that Hashi's describing about some of the work that we're doing together between the two companies. So, big picture, key platform, and then don't forget the automation and the infrastructure that supports that platform.
Yep, that's good. So this is one of those keys, right? We didn't diverge from the previous OpenShift is in the corner. We're just adding OpenShift AI, the data platform. On the top, and this maybe model hosting is an interesting one. A lot of his engineers, they want to use whatever the latest model that came out yesterday, they want to use it today in their experiments. So hosting them in a controlled environment that has access to data in the right way is really critical. But so remember this is how we did it. Let's go maybe to the last slide here, or one of the last slides. We got 1 minute. So AI readiness, look, we had so much complexity. I'll summarize it. A lot of complexity, a lot of cost as well. We are watching that as well. The standardization and kind of focus on security, compliance, and building the AI foundation, that was the key on our journey.
And from our point of view, we were looking for the infrastructure needed to support model fine-tuning, models as a service, leveraging these higher-level services built around models, having this consistent platform from an engineering point of view made it really gave us efficiency so we could move faster. And again, when we're talking to customers, we're hearing the same things. How do we do data cleansing, data management, data engineering, build some consistency, and then give access to all of these tools, which are moving really quickly to our employees within our enterprise customer base.
Let's go to the lessons learned. I think this is really important. And one thing I want to especially stress in Switzerland is we did a lot of these transformations, be it the big sales transformation, big data transformation. These are bold visions, and they're super aggressive. The sales transformation, we had 1 year, basically, do it or get fired. Not in a real sense, but it was like you only have that time because otherwise you cross financial boundaries, etc. But you got to lead with a bold vision. If you don't do that, just iterative steps, you'll never get anywhere. So bold vision, but prepare to do the work, right? I think we did one huge transformation, and then basically we knew, hey, this will be really rough. Use like a player. We actually used Switzerland for one reason, as in like try it there. If it works in Switzerland, it will work in Europe. If it works in Europe, try it in the US. If it works in the US, try it in Latin America, try it in Asia. But that was our approach. But you gotta have a bold vision. Understand it will take time. Things don't happen overnight. The first attempt to do something will not work, but take that iterative step. And this is especially in Switzerland, perfection can be the enemy of good enough, right? So like MVP, like the minimal viable project, work from there up is really the right way that you get to actually transfer a bold vision into reality.
Just to reiterate or to reinforce that, the part of what Marco talked about was Dataverse and the data cleanup work. And one of the things that I have conversations with customers about in their AI journey is that data story. So the perfection being the goal, you may never get there, which means you may never start your AI journey. So you have to have that bold vision and start down that path, but then looking for those small wins, that iterative approach, very much like we do in the software world, release early, release often, iterate, stay agile. You have the vision, you know where you're going, but you're ensuring that at each stage you're just doing just enough, just to show a success, show some advancement. And that has been instrumental in our ability to ultimately gain momentum and then move faster and faster.
You see the other ones like data, he mentioned data, knowledge, change management, leadership, buy-in, all these classical things. But I do think the bold vision and execute against it is key. With that, I think I got the sign of 0 minutes a few times. So thank you very much for coming. Yeah. Hope this was useful. And I'll see you in the hallway, I guess.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.